you want to raise a great adult, you don't say, because I said so. You don't say, I'm big, you're little, I'm right, you're wrong. You raise somebody who knows how to think and respond, not trying to teach them what to think.
If you have enough people giving up agency for a long enough time, eventually someone will be like, okay, you don't want agency, I'll take it from you.
The kids were learning. They were actively learning by conversing with one another. And then the adult comes in and says, stop that, you have to come learn.
And this little boy was trying to balance on it. And the mom said, oh, get down from there, you might get hurt. I'm like, he's this high off the ground. Let him fall and get hurt. How hurt could he get?
What we're really exploring is this conflict between agency and community. Based on your description of the past few decades, America has shifted way over to the side of community. And one thing communities are very concerned about is safety.
Well, hello everyone. It's Jim O'Shaughnessy with another episode of Infinite Loops. Today I am especially excited because as my guests, I have the very first recipients of the first O'Shaughnessy Fellowship, which is $100,000 for a year to pursue their project, dream, idea, invention, anything, no strings attached. Nat's going to share with you how he really didn't believe that, and he really grilled me. Martha, too. You were more diplomatic about it, though, Martha. My guests today, Nat and Martha Sharpe, who are O'Shaughnessy Fellows and who ostensibly are going to be spending their $100,000 fellowship and looking into new methods of education for children to start with, and we're going to talk about why. But the part that is, I think, going to be great and very, very helpful for everyone who's playing along is you're going to be making movies about it. Welcome, guys.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Jim.
Yeah, it's exciting.
So I love you guys, and your application, which I'm thinking I'm going to talk to my podcast folks to see whether we can, the video version of this, we can include your application because it was fucking brilliant. And you knew that you would get me, Nat, especially. You had interactions with me before, and you knew that using Floyd's The Wall and things like that, you hit everything I love. But tell us and our audience about yourselves. What drove you to this interest, the interest in filmmaking? Let's develop the story of who you guys are.
Great. You want to start off?
Yeah, so Martha and I actually met when we were, I had just graduated film school. It was just a one-year kind of program. I was 19, and she'd always wanted to make a movie, so we ended up making a movie together with our friends and fell in love, got married, and then we started having kids, and then it was a little harder to make movies. So
we've always wanted to. And okay, so the movie we made is called The Terrible Tickle Monster, and I wrote the screenplay, and it was based on the epic poem Beowulf, and it had songs from Fiddler on the Roof. So it was quite the production. It was only 20 minutes long, but it was so much fun to make.
Yeah, but we did costumes, we did all the stuff, and then of course I got to have the fun of impressing a beautiful young woman with all my editing magic and all that stuff, which I enjoed.
Editing,
which is the real reason you went to film school, right?
I didn't realize it at the time, but apparently that's that was why.
Good outcome. Good outcome.
Yes, unexpected, but
so basically we loved working together and we wanted to do more together. So that's where the getting married part came in. We're like, let's just do everything together. Let's just do life together. How about that?
Pretty much.
And so the kids, I don't think either of us really had a huge longing for kids. I've never been a baby person or different things, but we've always wanted people to share life with and some kind of community, friends to talk to and do stuff with, So basically we're just raising our own friends to talk to and do stuff with.
But yeah, we had 4 kids in 5 years. So that was a little too
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's, I mean, that is, it's one of those things. Like, another analogy I've come up with is like, it was like investing on margin. So it was super risky, super incredibly risky. I don't recommend it necessarily, but it is paying off. Like, it is like, and I think it's going to continue to paying off as we get older, and they develop their own lives and continue to enrich our lives.
Right.
It's going to be really, really amazing. But going back to like the storytelling, it's like, so we just basically focused on survival for quite a few years, and then eventually I learned to code, and we were able to like raise ourselves above the poverty line for the first time. So that was in 2018.
Right.
And then Martha learned how to code too.
Right, because he got us above the poverty line, but I wanted to go way beyond that. I'm like, I want more. I want so much more.
Which is the story of our relationship. Like, I've always been perfectly, well, not perfectly, but content enough with whatever circumstance we tend to find ourselves in.
Yeah, just a laptop and quiet time, and he's good.
And the internet. Give me access to the internet.
Yeah.
And I will be able to, I'll be relatively happy. So.
Yeah, I'm the one who wants to do all sorts of projects in the real world as opposed to the digital world, and that takes a lot more space and money. Anyway, but yeah, having kids. Since we started having kids, we've kind of been on this quest that launched us into this new quest and exploration of how can we do this. I mean, it's hard to have kids, and I think especially in our culture, it's just not set up for having kids in general, let alone more than 1 or 2. And the way, we know a lot of families in North Dakota who've been having tons of kids, and there's a reason they live in North Dakota. It's because it's cheaper and there's a lot more space and etc. But we don't want to live in North Dakota on a little farmstead in frozen land, So we were trying to find a different way. And in a certain sense, it's like a way that could make it easier for everyone. Like we like to use ourselves as guinea pigs. Like
definitely,
we like experimenting and taking small risks to see what happens, and then adjusting from there. We're willing to use ourselves, and the kids are pretty game for it too, as guinea pigs. So that's what we've been doing. So with this fellowship, we get to continue doing it even more without. Even more,
and basically, and
film ourselves.
I think that's the biggest difference. It's like, even if we hadn't gotten the fellowship, we would have continued on this crazy path that we're on. But now the world is going to be basically get a little more, basically be along for the ride. I mean, it's going to be
right, and it gives us the freedom to see what other people are doing too.
Of course,
because there's lots of people dealing with the same issue. Like the same issues that we're all facing in our culture, that's just world, and finding really creative solutions for it. People are coming up with all sorts of things.
Definitely.
So, yeah, it's pretty great.
So much to unpack, so much I agree with there. When I was having kids, I started out young. My wife and I got married when we were 22, and we said, well, since we're crazy, we might as well have kids while we're young as well. And so I was 24 when my son was born. But we talked a lot before his birth about how we wanted to raise our kids and what were our objectives. And what we alighted on was really pretty simple, which is we want to raise great adults. And if you use that as your line, right, it prevents all sorts of natural tendencies that people who don't think and talk about it a lot do. So, for example, if you want to raise a great adult, you don't say, because I said so. You don't say, because I'm the boss, because I'm your dad and you're the son or daughter. You don't say, I'm big, you're little, I'm right, you're wrong. What you do is, hopefully, you raise somebody who knows how to think and respond, not trying to teach them what to think, right? And so that simple executable command, if you will, just prevents all sorts of the shit that people do just naturally and out of frustration, right? As you well know, Nat, as you point out, like the first 3 years of a child's life, your job as the parent is essentially to stop them from killing themselves, right? It's like, well, oh, what's this electricity over here? But that kind of feeds into the next thing I'd like your views on, which is children. If you want to like understand how humans learn, watch a child naturally, right? Because children are learning machines. And my opinion, which vibes with yours, is we developed a not great educational system that seemed almost to be as one of its objectives to beat that love of learning out of them, to beat that experimentation out of them, to make them, in quotes, good citizens and good workers that are going to, serve society. What do you? First off, what's your philosophy? I know it, but I'd like you to share it with our viewers, and then talk a bit about the beginnings of your quest and what you're finding.
Okay, yeah. I mean, should we share what we've been talking about like today, or where?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So the short answer is our philosophy is ongoing because we haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
Right.
We are still learning ourselves.
Life is about becoming, right?
I totally agree. So I think that's one thing we've seen in terms of education is that it seems intricately connected to the community it's happening in and the society it's happening in. And in it's perhaps inextricably. If you are being raised in a tribe in the Amazon jungle, your education will basically be to become part of that tribe and to survive in the jungle and and if you got transplanted from the jungle to New York City, your skills are going to not necessarily be transferable.
Right. Yeah. So that's just something we've come up with just the last couple of days is like, as we've been exploring different forms of education, but just realizing the purpose of education is to raise kids, like you said, into adults, but into adults that are going to flourish and contribute to a very specific community or society, right? So what form that education needs to take totally depends on what community you're raising them for.
Yeah. So basically, if you're raising them for a society where most of the citizens are basically these obedient, non-creative thinking, cogs in a wheel that can be interchangeable.
Then maybe you want to do the because I said so approach.
Exactly. Like it makes perfect sense. Like this is, I mean, it's not like, it makes sense. Yeah. So unfortunately though, it's like, since we don't want our kids to be like that, like we would rather have our kids be like you said, great adults that, the kind of adults we want to be, the kind of adults we want to relate to. We are pursuing these, basically a approach of more freedom, right?
And
I think that's the one word is
and what's crazy
freedom and trust.
Is like, if it depends on environment, I mean, like we're kind of nomadic, right? And a lot of people are becoming more nomadic. People can fly all over the world. People can drive all over the country. People can work from anywhere. So it's becoming more and more a global community, So it's like, how would you educate someone for a global community? I mean,
and not just global, not just like widespread,
but can be adapted to any environment.
Because our society is changing. I mean, this is the other thing we're noticing too. It's like, even if we could find the perfect curriculum to teach our kids, it would be obsolete in 5 years. Like,
yeah,
this is.
Or if they move to a different community, or I mean,
Yeah. So like, I guess that's the thing. Is like, even if Martha, like one reason we have basically done this more kind of, it's most similar probably to unschooling, which is like this type of homeschooling where you basically just give your kids time and resources and let them pursue their own interests. So like you said, if you watch a kid learn, like we have a 1-year-old baby, she's constantly learning. She's constantly grabbing things, hitting things, pushing her limits.
Mhm.
You know, she's experimenting with talking. She's experimenting with walking. We are not teaching her how to walk or how to talk, right? And that's kind of the bare bones philosophy that we're experimenting with is like, kids want to survive. They want to thrive. They want to learn.
And they want to do what adults are doing.
And they want to do what adults are doing. So, I mean, in our minds, and a lot of other people have tried this, it's like if you let kids have that freedom, they will find their own unique path that corresponds to their interests and their strengths. They will find that path even without, or not, I was going to say, despite having, no teacher hammering it over them. But I would say it's probably because there is no teacher, saying, no, don't. What's the example? Like you were with the kids and they were like playing with each other.
The sticks?
No, they were like playing with each other at the co-op. Like we're part of like this homeschooling co-op thing that meets like once a week. And
you're talking about the boys in the hallway?
No, well, again, we have so many stories. And at one point, like she was like trying to like help like these younger kids, and the kids just wanted to play together. They were like talking and doing stuff together. And then
And the teacher said, it's not time to play with your friends. It's not time to talk to your friends.
It's time to do story time or something.
Right.
And it's like what from Martha's perspective, she basically saw the teacher interrupting
the teacher
the learning.
And it's funny because the kids, or in that situation, I actually witnessed the kids totally tuning out the teacher's voice. I don't know if it was happening unconsciously, but the teacher was saying the kid's name over and over, and it's like she didn't even hear her. And at first, like, I was just the helper. And at one point, the teacher was going to do something else, so she asked me to do something with the kids for a while. So I, like, had him over here to do a story. And I get bored just reading a book to kids, right? I want it to be interactive. So I like start on the first page. I'm like, oh, whoa, look at that. What's that thing? And they're like, oh, it's this or whatever. And I start out like kids are not used to adults actually listening to them and respecting them and treating them like real people. You know, they're used to adults just guiding and controlling and telling them what to think, like you said. But so at first when I started out, their eyes were glazed over. I could tell they were just kind of tuning me out like they were with the other adults. But then eventually their eyes started to go towards me and their ears started to perk up. Wait, whoa, this adult is different. What's going on here? Because I was acting more like a kid and treating them more like adults. Like, hey, this is a crazy picture. What's happening here? And they're like, whoa, maybe it's this or maybe it's that. And I'm like, have you ever experienced this? And, just having a conversation more than just like, be quiet so I can read this book to you, Anyway, and they just were lighting up. They were having a conversation among themselves and sharing stories. And I mean, this is something that is not encouraged in schools. That kids were actually interacting and talking and asking questions and getting excited, Anyway, so why did we go into that?
I don't know. We're going on a
tangent.
I think that's good. Realism.
That's okay though, because that's a great tangent. That's the way I treated my children for the most part. Like I would treat them like I was going to listen to what they said, and would interact. I say the way I interact with my grandkids. And it's my oldest grandchild is grandson Pierce, Patrick's son, and like. I had been away and went back. We get together often for dinner and things. And so I was at their house and he goes, Papa, will you come and listen to me practice piano? I said, sure, I'd love to. And so we walked into the other room where the piano was and he goes, hey, Papa. And I went, yeah. And he goes, I didn't really want to practice piano. I miss our conversations. And I was like, I miss our conversations too, Pierce. It's wonderful. And he goes, yeah, I really just love talking to you. And I went, well, it makes me feel so good, but why? And he goes, because you don't treat me like a kid. And like, I was like, boom. Yeah. Right. And my mom used to say, out of the mouths of babes, comes some of the most profound wisdom in the world. And so I think you hit on so many things that are just true, observationally true, right? So my former career, I was a algorithmic investor, a quant. What does a quant do? They look at all the evidence and then they say, okay, so the evidence says that this is going to win X% of the time and it's going to lose X% of the time. But the point is, if we kind of followed a similar path and we just observed the way children interact, Martha, as you point out, like the kids were learning. They were actively learning by conversing with one another. And then the adult comes in and say, stop that. You have to come learn.
Yeah.
And what's really being said, in my opinion, and I have somewhat controversial opinions here, but what they're really saying is, stop that. You have to come over here and be indoctrinated. And you're going to be indoctrinated into what we want you to believe. And it gets back to your point earlier, which is that might work in a very limited setting where you have to learn how to, like the Amazon, right? You're going to learn which trees are going to be medical, right? You're going to learn where not to go to avoid being eaten, which is very highly specific knowledge. After all, our brains, the basic function of our brains is to keep us alive.
The ironic thing is I think a lot of like hunter-gatherer tribes like are not very dogmatic in how they teach.
I agree.
Well, one thing is that the adults and children aren't so separate.
Right. Like the kids are watching.
We watch and we imitate. That's the primary. We don't sit with a book and read as our primary way of learning. That's what's become the primary way, but naturally we watch and imitate, which is why YouTube videos this is how people learn nowadays, is they're watching and imitating through YouTube. But this is how kids want to learn too. So if you totally separate adults and kids, how are kids going to learn how to become adults? Right. They can't watch and imitate. So yeah, that's fascinating. And I think there's other countries, I think, where you see kids just around more. But in America, it really is like kids belong here at this time, and this is adults only. And like we take our kids around everywhere because they homeschool, and and people ask like, do you have a day off from school? Or what, why aren't you in school? I was just like, we are in school. Like this is school,
I think that, I was one of the first classes in Montessori when it came to America. My father was really into Montessori and helped facilitate the first school where I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I was the guinea pig.
No kidding.
Awesome. Yeah.
It was great. It was awesome. Like I was at a friend's house and I foolishly thought that I could push a door that was actually glass open at full running speed. And I went right through the glass. Weird. And so anyway, I was bleeding like hell. It's one of the few scars that I actually have. You can still see it. But so my mom wrapped it up and brought me down, and I don't really remember this, but my mom told me this story so many times that I remember it that way. And so apparently the nurse was trying to, I was bleeding quite copiously. And so the nurse is trying to, be calm and ask me questions. And she goes, so what are you studying? And I said, well, I'm studying the plants and about xylem and phloem and geometry and all these things. I was 6.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom telling the story, my mom said, the nurse looks at my mom and says, is this kid pulling my leg? The whole purpose of Montessori is based on putting kids of various ages together, right? Because Martha, you're right. There's loads of evidence for why we learn mimetically. We even have things called mirror neurons to facilitate that, right? Mm-hmm. Mr. Girard got his mimetic theory because that's one of the main ways we learn things. We copy other people. And it's a really efficient way of learning, right? Very, very efficient. And so if you're thinking about the world we're going into, which it sounds like both of you guys are, what do you want your kids to learn? Well, you want them to be agile. You want them to be adaptable. You want them to be learning machines, right? And I love the fact of unschooling, right? Because we're going into a world where knowing how to think, knowing how to interact with others is going to be of the highest utility, I think, to most people. And we are going up against the cultural stasis of having done education this particular way, right? Robert Anton Wilson would say that most education people are trying to install a correct answer machine in your brain.
Oh, right.
And we all know there is no correct.
Well, I mean, I've thought about, one thing I've reflected on is how ironic it is that in school, the children are the ones who are expected to give the answers. They should be the ones asking the questions, right?
Bingo. Yes.
Right. I mean, like, it's just it's crazy.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. I end up learning from my kids. They keep me up to speed with what's happening in the world.
Definitely.
You know, because we've pretty much given them pretty much unlimited use of computers and screens, you know, and they've learned so much through it. You know, there's a lot of fear surrounding screens because there's tons of really nasty stuff out there, all mixed in with the good stuff. So far, they've come across shows that I think are stupid, but nothing really terrible, you know. But they're always sharing facts with me and wanting to do experiments because they saw it on a YouTube video or different things like that. And they discovered like Roblox and Minecraft for themselves. I didn't introduce them to it. And one thing, like, as we were traveling and we'd bring the kids to playgrounds, they would make immediate friends on the playgrounds because all they have to say is they play Roblox or Minecraft or Among Us, and they'd have a whole group of friends, a whole group of kids that want to play real life Minecraft or real life Among Us or whatever. And versus like a lot of the more traditional homeschool families that we've related to who restrict screens a lot, they don't have any idea how to relate to anyone outside their group, you know? So like we talked about at the beginning, education is to raise kids for a specific community or group, right? So if they want their kids to stay in that group the rest of their lives, then that's fine. They're doing a great job. But if they want their kids to be able to relate outside the group, they might have a challenge ahead of them.
Or form their own group. And I think that's the kind of statistically what's happened with a lot of, like, you know, people that are raised with kind of this unschooling or self-directed education kind of approach. A lot of them end up becoming entrepreneurs. Like they don't fit in with the 9 to 5.
Don't just say yes, I'll do because they don't fit in with the yes because I said so.
I mean, it really is, like, it's good to admit that it does come with a certain disadvantage where, like, I think you use the term unemployable. Like, it sounds like a lot of times, like, these kids they'll like try a 9 to 5 and they'll just be like, screw this, like, I'm not gonna, like, what, and they'll go off and like do their own thing or so it does, like, if you basically you want your kids to have like a stable conventional job, then maybe this isn't the right path for you.
That's really a good insight. And I'm delighted to hear you're thinking about it that way, because that's right. You're absolutely right. One of my objections was to be unemployable, right? I employed myself. And I only worked for another corporation for 5 years in my life. And that was for Stearns. And even there, I was, always on the edge of being fired as a discipline problem. But a couple of things, the whole screen time thing, I think that's a really good example of a poorly designed study, because rather than looking at what are the children or adults for that matter, what are the people looking at through those screens should be what we are looking at. We shouldn't be saying screen time as if the screen, it's like window time. Oh, Jim, you spent 5 hours staring out the window. That was a misuse and misallocation of your time. Well, what the fuck was I staring at? I mean, was it just nothing? Then maybe. But was there like some fascinating thing in nature going on out there? Maybe then it was a good use of time. And
Yeah.
so the way those studies get designed, yeah, I think is very poorly designed study. Like it's not the screen, it's what the screen is revealing and what the student is person is looking at, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you looked at that, then all of the screen time stuff becomes a lot less scary. Martha, as you point out, I am not an anarchist. I am not saying, hey, do whatever you want. Yeah, you're right. There is a lot of bad stuff through those screens, but there's also a lot of really great stuff through those screens. So rather than to make it a question about screens, make it a question about content behind the screens. And then I think you get to a better place. Nat, to your point about in-group, out-group, yeah, of course, right? Like if you're trying to raise somebody who I have a lot of friends who and colleagues who are either still in India or of Indian origin. And like the jokes are always about their mom and dad, right? And how their mom and dad are bitterly disappointed in them if they're not a doctor or a lawyer or at least a PhD. And so, if that's your goal, then you're right. Then you're going to advocate a very different kind of educational system.
Yep.
I think that the way the world is unfolding, we're covering it in our Great Reshuffle series, is the future is going to be very bright for entrepreneurs, for people who are agile and don't fit in so much with the classic old take. Tell me a little bit about the adventure so far. Tell me about the blue bus, which I think is very cool. Tell me why, what led you to decide you needed a blue bus, and then your early forays into some of the different ways of educating kids, and kind of what your thoughts were about that.
Yeah, the bus thing it's still kind of a mystery to me too, and
it's a very expensive prop. That's
there you go.
we just figured it was symbolic. It's a school bus.
Yeah,
I think part of it, yeah, and there's a lot of symbolism.
No, definitely.
That's right. But I think for me, more and more through the years, we're discovering the power of following your interests, which is a lot of what, like, the kind of education we're looking at, like kids follow their interests and what happens. Because a lot of times our subconscious can tell that there's something we need to do, something necessary for survival, or something we really need to learn that our conscious mind just isn't aware of. Our conscious mind is like, why? Why do I need to know that? That's silly and expensive and weird,
I'm the conscious mind in this relationship.
You're the conscious mind. I argue with myself a lot. Like, I can tell my conscious, I was in turmoil for like weeks. I was obsessed with getting a school bus. I'm like, why am I obsessed? It doesn't seem to contribute to anything we're doing. Why do I need a school bus? But if it was not an obsession that was going to go away, like I just knew it. So I'm just like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to trust. I'm going to follow my interests and see where it goes. And I think.
Well, this is something that she's been interested in doing this since like she was in high school.
Yeah.
Like basically remodeling a school bus and living in it and traveling around.
Right. And our year living in an RV, 2 years ago, we were full-time RV.
Yeah, so
family.
2021, we spent all year in an RV going all over the country.
And that was basically a huge learning experience and like an experiment, because I think this has always been my desire and goal, is the schooly life.
Start from a
converted school bus, And if you had to ask my conscious mind right now, why, I might say that I'm still seeking community. I'm still seeking people who are more like us and exploring the way that we are.
I mean, there is like this very interesting dispersed community of people. I mean, there's like nomadic kind of like families and stuff, but there's also specifically schooly families, they're called.
Yeah.
Who live in these converted school buses, travel around the country and like meet up in different areas, where there's like
huge gatherings.
Sometimes there's huge gatherings of like hundreds of school buses.
1,000. I think like Schoolie Palooza had like 1,000 rigs there. That's just in the middle of the Arizona desert in January, and all these schoolie. I mean, anyway, in a certain sense, it's kind of like the adaptability thing, you know. Being nomadic, our culture's not set up for being nomadic. You know, you have a neighborhood, you have a school. Whenever you look for a place to live, what's the selling point? Like, oh, they have a really good school there. I'm like, thanks for telling us. We're not good.
Yeah. So like we have been geographically basically independent in terms of schooling since the beginning,
and in terms of jobs.
And now since like 2009 or since the pandemic, when my job went remote, we have been completely geographically independent in terms of jobs. So it's like we are basically doing this experiment of this 21st century experiment of a family who does not have like any like local ties to a school or local ties to a job, which I would say those two are like the majority of like where people get their sense of community, where they get their sense of, I mean, it's like, so.
Yeah. And talking about screens, right? Screens is what's allowing this.
Exactly.
The internet. And it's connecting. I mean, we can have our jobs, we can do school, we can learn, we can relate to other people and have friendships all through the internet. So people are kind of going two different directions with this newfound ability to just be anywhere. One is to be more nomadic and just go everywhere. And the other thing that we've seen people doing is actually buying like land and starting to farm and do more of that kind of thing. So this is like two different things people are going towards, is becoming nomads or having like a farmstead and living off the land kind of thing. But it's the internet that's enabling people to do this.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, so part of like how the bus like fits into like our, you know, this journey of the fellowship is like we've actually visited like a couple different schools now. Like we visited a school in Asheville, North Carolina, that it's part of this. They're all over the country now, but they're called Agile Learning Centers, where they basically have kids from like, was it like 5 or 6 to 14 about? Is that?
Depends on the school.
Yeah, some of them go all the way up
to 18, some schools.
And they basically let the kids like just school themselves. Like they give them, you know, there's resources, there's like classes that aren't conditional or aren't like mandatory.
Yep.
But the kids offer things too. So we've been visiting like some of those places. Partly, I mean, we've been filming a ton, like interviewing people, interviewing kids, showing the kids. But we're also letting our own kids like experience that and like try that out. And so like that's like I see that potentially happening like with the school bus. If we get a thing that we can actually live in, we're gonna be able to I mean, that'll be part of this journey, is traveling around,
being able to visit.
Basically, I mean, think of
places.
Yeah. I mean, just visually, it's going to be like, here's this family putting their kids in a school bus, going to school. Like, even if we're not visiting schools, just driving down the road into a new state. It's like the magic school bus, Jim. Like this is literally like, this is a future of education, whether you're doing it like physically or online. Yeah. Like, I don't know. So it'll be it's fascinating.
So we are exploring for our own family. Like we're visiting these schools with a thought, because I've thought maybe that's what our kids need. Maybe that's what we need.
Yep.
But I've also thought like maybe if we were just nomadic and had friends all over the country and got together with them every now and then, that would be just what we need. So it's exploring for our own family too.
Yeah.
What's been the most surprising thing on your early interviews? You mentioned you've been filming a lot already. What has surprised you the most from the people you've been talking to?
What surprises me the most is that there are actually other people out there that are like us. I'm like, whoa. I'm like getting their background stories. I'm like, whoa, they're basically saying the same story we have. Like they've been exploring the same things. And I don't know why we've never lived in a place that had other people who had the same kind of story that we did.
Oh, interesting.
What about what's
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely, I guess, most surprising. I mean, I guess I find it very cool that there's. I mean, I guess it's not really surprising because it's like we've already been doing it, but just seeing the variety, like the two main schools we visited. One was in Asheville, where they had like a huge backyard and like a stream and trees and all this stuff, all these resources. And the second one I just visited was in Williamsburg, New York, downtown, like no backyard, but they're still doing a very similar kind of thing. And then like they have parks nearby. They go on field trips. They go on. They've adapted it to that environment.
they're more nomadic. They don't rely on having all the
Well,
resources in their schools.
exactly.
They go out.
Because they're in a place that has a lot of other resources, and like a lot of the kids are like they have permission from the parents just to go to the park by themselves. Like it's fascinating. So I think that's surprising to me, which is just like seeing like how many different ways this kind of philosophy could be implemented.
Yeah. I was talking yesterday with a friend about the my upbringing, right? So I'm 62. I was born and came of age in the early 1970s. And literally it was just like, see you, mom, dad, going out with my friends. You get on your bike. They wouldn't have any idea where you were. There were no cell phones. There were no any of those things. You did a lot of dangerous things, quite frankly, and retrospectively. The things we climbed on, we used to make insane ice slides in the winter. I grew up in Minnesota where it's all, but literally we would bring water out, pour it down a hill this steep, and then get on one of those little slips of plastic and go down as fast as we possibly could. And I wonder if, like, what do you think caused the whole helicopter parent phenomena? And is that like, is there a cure for that?
That was one of the first things that we kind of did a shift away from before our kids were even school age. We weren't even thinking about schooling at this point, but we're just like, what would happen if we were just much more hands off, So you talked about like up to the age of 3, your job is just to keep them alive, but just barely, I mean, it's not to keep them safe. It's to keep them alive. Right. And we said,
yeah. And basically if they're never getting hurt, they're never learning.
Right.
It means they're never finding those limits.
I mean, even our little baby who's crawling around now, like it would be much safer if we just carried her around all the time and we didn't let her just crawl around and explore, and I remember going to a playground once, and there was this little ledge that surrounded the playground, like a little railroad tie or something that was like this high off the ground. And this little boy was trying to balance on it. And the mom said, "Oh, get down from there. You might get hurt." I'm like, he's this high off the ground. Let him fall and get hurt. How hurt could he get? And then he'd get better and he'd learn like, oh yeah, I could get hurt if I do this without his mom having to tell him that, and so anyway, you're preventing the helicopter parent thing prevents kids from learning and prevents kids from a lot of what we talk about is developing a sense of agency, developing a sense of agency.
I would say preserving a sense of agency. I think you're born with a sense of agency.
It kind of fluctuates. Like,
you think so?
That's where the terrible twos come in. Like it goes up and down. Like at the age of 1, they're all excited because they have all this new agency. But then by the age of 2, like it's not enough for them. They feel the lack of their agency again. And it's up and down.
Agency is, that's more just like the internal sense. Like the reason they get frustrated is because they have agency. I mean, agency is like the drive, like the independence, right? I mean,
oh, I thought it was the ability to actually act on it.
I don't know. What would you say? Would you say agency is an internal
it's funny.
thing?
I have a new chief of staff, and he and I were just talking about that yesterday. It's one of the litmus tests I use when I'm looking at companies, whether I want to invest in them or not. How much agency do the principals have? How much can I observe? And I look at agency as a sense of it's on me. right? I think, there might, to your point, Nat, there might be it might be just a natural sense of a human being agency. But it seems to me that culture can either encourage or discourage agency.
Definitely.
And I think that we've had a culture over the last, say, 30 or 40 years that has been discouraging agency. But I think that was an improvement over the cultures of the last 300 years that were about forbidding agency and requiring compliance, right? With doctrine and with, no, you have to believe in this supernatural being, not that one. And so I think we're hopefully moving in the right direction. But people with agency, I think you can tell the minute you interact with them, right? Somebody, it's like the thing I cherish the most is having agency. But agency is not just a free ride, right? If you maintain agency, it's your fault, right?
Exactly.
You can't blame someone else.
Can't blame someone else.
So I think that's going back to your question about how this all changed with parenting. That'd be my guess. Is a lot of it is like, it's actually comforting as a parent to think that it's not your fault. Or, so it's like, if you make
someone else to blame.
So basically, letting your kids be agentic, like if something happens to your kid, other parents and the government aren't going to blame the kid for being too agentic. They're going to blame the parent. They're going to blame me.
So that's the helicopter parent thing.
Yeah, they're really protecting
self-preservation.
Yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
preserving the child. That's
really interesting.
It's like, and that's the risk that we've been willing to take. I feel like we've been risking not our children, but ourselves,
of course.
By allowing our kids to do these things that are more risky. We are risking the judgment of other parents and even like having the cops called on us or something, but we think that that's a risk we're willing to take for the sake of our children. Like people could see it. People might judge us as being negligent, but we're actually doing this for the sake of our children.
Yeah. So that's what it still doesn't answer the question of how that changed. Like, I'm not sure where exactly. I mean, you were alive. Like you should have insight into this more than we do, in a certain sense. Like what happened? What happened between your generation and our generation? Like you were raised with more freedom.
I mean, did schools get blamed for things?
Yeah, was it lost? Was it like what?
Did parents like sue the schools for things? Or I mean, how is it that I mean, I can see that like in the medical industry, right? Like people blame the doctors and blame them because they're giving all responsibility over to them.
Right.
So that means they have to take more responsibility. So basically, you just have to do whatever the doctor says, or you have to actually like sign a waiver that you're rejecting his advice so that you can't sue them, right?
Yep.
So I'd assume something like that probably happened to make it more like if someone was blaming someone else for kids getting hurt or something, and so whoever that someone else was decided to impose more rules and regulations because they were going to bear the responsibility for it. It's like, who's bearing the responsibility is the question.
Right. Yeah. So if nobody, basically, like you said, if agency really, it comes down to like, it's on me and nobody wants to claim that, then,
I mean, parents, I've heard terrible stories of parents taking their injured child to the hospital and immediately they're being investigated by social services.
Right.
Like the fact that parents are afraid to take their injured child to the hospital is a bad thing. Like, yes, I should be free. I shouldn't have to be afraid to take my injured child to the hospital. Because, they need help. This is a sign of a good parent that I'm taking him to the hospital. Yeah. So anyway, it's just the agency thing probably is like parents are afraid of getting in trouble if their child gets hurt, I think. So they become helicopter parents.
Yeah. I think that's super insightful about Martha, your comment earlier about and I guess it was both of you, but maybe it's the parents trying to protect themselves because of this creep of the laws and prescriptions, right? What were you asked, Nat? What was the difference? Like, this is one of my favorite hobby horses. Like, I'll walk around Manhattan and I'll point at all these great things, like the New York Public Library and the Empire State Building, and I'll go on my rant. This is when America was a great fucking country because people were allowed to do shit. Like, read Bill Bryson's book, America One Summer, I think 1921 is what he focuses on. And like, that world was just a completely different world. What America was the freedom of speech, the rule of law, and then fuck off. Like, go do whatever you want to do. And so Mount Rushmore, Coleridge was president when the guy was doing Mount Rushmore. Well, there were no permits. There was no study that took 12 years to determine whether he should be able to pursue this or not. And like, they told Coleridge about it, and he goes, "Oh, cool. Where is this? Let's go see it." And so the country was filled with naturally risk-seeking people. Why? Well, who else gets on a ship and leaves the country of origin, their family, everything they know, and goes to a foreign land? People who are a little more risk-seeking than other people. So America has like a different DNA structure, or did it for a while. And a lot of people were brought here against their will too. So we have to make sure about making sure but like, talk about the Underground Railroad, talk about the people who, like, even when they were taken here against their will, they were like, okay, let's fight, let's go, let's mix it up. But the country was a very different place. I think in many respects, the country's gotten a lot better in terms of universal rights for people, in terms of not discriminating against people because of their color or sexual preference or religion or all of those things. I think all of those are to be celebrated and great. But one of the things that we lost that I think we should fight against is this allowing ourselves to be dominated by like massive rule books. Friend Philip Howard, who has a organization called Common Sense, and basically what he talks about is, do you know the New York City, the average New York City school teacher, public school teacher, the compliance manual for them, and for people who aren't watching me, I'm holding up two phone books, if you remember what phone books were, about this thick.
Yeah.
And like, I went to a board meeting because I'm on his board, and like, he starts reading these regulations. You guys wouldn't believe it. Like, for example, it is highly prescribed what a teacher can do when a child is in obvious physical or emotional distress. They do not include hugging that child. They do not include soothing that child in any way. That's forbidden. And that's forbidden because of some lawsuit from 10 years ago. And
exactly.
And so we let these rules accumulate, and we forget why they got put into place in the first place. And then we just have all of these rules prohibiting, right? And so we have created a system, I don't think intentionally, by the way. I think we have created a system where we are stripping agency away from people. And maybe for the reason, Martha, that you mentioned, maybe it was because people got so goddamn tired of having everyone say, oh, it's your fault, you're the one that right?
I mean, basically, if you have enough people giving up agency for a long enough time, eventually someone will be like, okay, you don't want agency, I'll take it away. I'll take it from you.
But you have to do what I say.
But you have to do what I say. So so this is the thing, Jim, and this is like, I think hopefully our documentary or like, we still haven't narrowed it down completely. It might be like a series of like, episodes. But basically what we want to explore is not just education. Okay. Cause I think that's just, if you just like talk about education, it's like, you're not really getting to the nitty gritty. What we're really exploring is this conflict between agency and community.
Ah, that's great.
And I think that, and so many people I know, even ones that don't have kids, are dealing with the same thing of like, how can we, on the one hand, have the sense of community, and on the other hand, have this preserve our sense of agency. And I think that's, so I would say, based on your description of the past like few decades, America has shifted way over to the side of community and focus. And one thing communities are very concerned about is safety. I mean, communities are very, I mean, that's conformance, safety, of just preserving what you have, not trying, why would you take a risk, right? I mean, it's just not worth it. It's not worth the, so I think that's what we're really going to explore. And I don't have an answer. I don't know anybody that has an answer that satisfies me. So I think that's don't you think that's, I mean, that's part of our personal exploration too, is like, we're very kind of agentic people, but one consequence is that we're very lonely in a certain sense.
Isolated. Yeah.
Very isolated. Like we try to relate to these other people in our little suburban neighborhood. We have barely any way we can connect with them. Like, right?
So, yeah, but one of the reasons why I did the fellowship the way I did, right? And that you were funny when we were visiting in person in New York. You were like, I really had a hard time believing that there were like no strings. But one of the reasons why is because of what you just said. I wanted to empower people like yourself who are super creative, super thoughtful. Like, guess what? Plans change. And I love that you've evolved this into, it'll be about educating kids, and that's important. And I agree. And that's why you got the grant. But what a great idea to make it like, well, maybe it might be between this tension between community and people with a full sense and obligation of their own agency. I love that, because that is that's digging a lot deeper. And, I'm a huge systems thinker. In other words, I believe if you understand the underlying system of anything, right? A business, a government, a society, a group, whatever. If you can understand the underlying foundational system, you're going to be much better at forecasting what's going to happen, like what's going to come out of that system. And so I love that. Sounds to me kind of like what you're doing. In other words, okay, so we start with the way we're educating kids. We're not happy with this traditional way. We want to look at these other ways. Why aren't we happy with this traditional way? And then, maybe there's this tension between our attitude, which is we want to retain all of our personal agency, be unemployable, right? To use my term. But hey, we also understand, like, we're not anarchists here. We don't want Mad Max. We understand the community aspect too. So I think that's going to be a great evolution, if you will, of the film that is going to emerge from this. Another thing you guys have done, which I find very clever, is your mini grants. How's that going? How are the mini grants going?
We didn't get enough applicants.
So apparently it can be hard to give people money. It can be like we were trying to give money away, and like we advertised in all of these like Facebook groups. We sent emails to all these schools, and we were looking for like 6 graduates, or 6 people that were basically graduating from this kind of democratic or agile learning center or unschooling type education. And we only got 2 people to submit applications. So, and it was great, and they were pretty interesting. But we were hoping that we could basically be able to have them film themselves as they went along, the next like 6 months, and what that, like applying to colleges and all that. So we were going to give them $1,000 each. So we decided to kind of like, once again, being adaptable, we decided to kind of just shift course. And so we gave each of the 2 applicants $500 just for applying. You're like, you know what, guys, here's some money. Just go, whatever. And we'll probably still use their application videos in our documentary. So like that will be great, on the ground kind of footage. But yeah, so right now the mini fellowship thing is we've shifted course from that.
In the meantime, that means we have more funds for the school bus and for traveling, right? So,
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely not wasted.
Yeah, that is great. What have been the reactions to the school bus? It's very cool looking, and I will try to have a picture of it in the show notes.
yeah.
But like, what are the reactions you're getting from people who see it?
Wow, everyone loves it, especially kids. Like, kids never get to just explore and play with an actual school bus.
Yeah.
They have to just get on, go to their assigned seat or whatever. Or some other kids have never even been on a school bus, like our kids, or. So like we invite the neighbor kids wanted to come over and see it. We popped the engine compartment open because he's interested in engine.
Yeah, no, this is like a little like
they got to go in, try the door.
8-year-old boy, and he was asking us like, is it a V8 engine? Is it a like? He's like obsessed with engines.
Yeah.
Like, this is not school. He's not learning this in school. Like, so it's like he's learning, and then he loves opening the door mechanism,
or jumping out the emergency exit and different things. Just anyone who sees it.
I mean,
they get this big smile on their face, like what? Like what is going on?
But I think most adults just think we're crazy because, like once again, like Martha and I, like we've been following people or have been doing this for years, so this just feels normal. That yeah, of course you can take a school bus and turn it into a camper, right? Of course you can do that.
Yeah.
But it's like for most people, it's just like
why did you buy a school bus?
Right. It's insane. Well, number one, it was $3,000. Okay.
Yeah.
Like This was like nothing.
The engine itself is probably worth more than that. Like, what the heck?
Like, this is like right from, but we basically got it like right from like a wholesale auction of like a Georgia public school. And so it's like number one, like just the fact that you can do that is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where it's like it really is going to make the documentary so much more interesting too, because it's like just in general, right? The whole point of like what we're trying to convey, okay? And then I talk about this on Twitter a lot. This is kind of like if I have a tagline, this is my tagline. It's just you can do stuff, just do stuff,
Right.
right? I mean, so it's like one of the biggest things we've learned about learning is that by doing stuff that you've never done before, you will gain information that you could not have achieved any other way. Right?
I am learning tons of stuff. Oh my goodness. Just this whole process. I'm learning. Okay, so one thing I learned, I've never dealt with circuit boards or soldering before in my life, and I never wanted to. Just like that stuff is way complicated. Well, it's an international school bus, and they're known for the control panel just kind of dying, So I found a few YouTube videos, and they all had the same solution. You take it apart, you take the circuit board, and you just resolder those points that the electricity connects to, and voila, it works. I'm like, okay, here's a new thing I'm doing now. So I'm taking it apart, getting out the circuit board, borrowing my dad's soldering iron, and supposedly I just melt these things again, and that should fix the hairline fractures, and it works. So that's one example of me learning through this whole, and that's just one thing. There's tons of stuff I've been learning.
She's learning about propane she's doing propane
there's so many different connections for propane. Oh gosh.
I mean, the last but
I know there were so many different sizes.
But I guess this is the thing, Jim, and I'm sure you've seen this in your own life too, okay? But the way we've discovered that we learn, at least, and I think this is the way kids learn too, okay, is it starts with what they want to do. It starts with like the end thing. Nobody sits down and says like, oh, I want to spend today learning. Like, that's not how human brains work. We don't give a shit about learning.
Yeah.
Learning, it sucks.
So
okay.
Asking, what did you learn today? You say, what did you do today?
What did you do? And so this is the thing. It's like when I have had a goal in mind, and like this is like with Martha, like she doesn't care about soldering, she doesn't care about propane, she doesn't care about all this stuff. Okay, she just wants to have this school bus that we can take the whole family and explore and meet these other families, go to these schools, and in order to achieve that, there's all of the stuff she has to learn.
If I have to learn about diesel engines, I'll learn about diesel engines. I never wanted to learn about diesel engines. I never ever wanted to learn about them, but here I am.
Yeah, and so I think, I think this is one of the fundamental things is that the normal education system is set up to be like just in case type of learning. It's like, well, I don't know what you're going to be when you grow up, kid. So I'm just going to teach you a big, broad swath of everything, like every subject, and you'll forget everything. But yeah, I mean, but unfortunately, most kids forget a lot of what they learn. But it's just in case.
Just in case.
Just in case, like someday down the road, you might need to know calculus.
As opposed to in-demand learning. I like in-demand learning.
So what Martha's doing and what our kids do is in-demand learning or on-demand. It's like it starts with the desire and the objective. And then you're like, okay, how do I get there?
Yep. And what's the first question you think people ask when they find out about self-directed learning and unschooling and such? What do you think they ask almost immediately?
I would guess that they ask, like, how do you even start? What is there a guide? Is there something that I can, is there some sort of instruction manual? People love to be instructed.
Well, here's a question. What is one subject that people assume kids will never voluntarily learn on their own?
Math.
Ah, you got it. That's the question. What about math? Like, what about math?
That's one of the number one questions.
The number one question, like, everyone assumes that math is a subject no one will voluntarily learn, right? And therefore they never will learn it unless they're forced to. But the thing is, if you don't actually need math, why are you going to force kids to learn it anyway? And if you do need it, our assumption is if you do need it, you're going to learn it, which our kids are learning. They're learning the math that they need to know because they need it to do the stuff they want to do.
Yeah, like the biggest thing, like one thing we do is that we don't really have like mandatory chores. We basically just like have optional jobs that they can be paid for.
Incentives, baby, you got it.
Yeah. So that's what they do is that basically they'll have things they want to buy, and they'll find they'll basically work with us, or the best would be externally too, like money coming in externally. Mm-hmm. But basically they work in order to buy these things they're saving up for, and they, in order to like calculate, like they're using math to calculate the money and the change so I guess that's the thing in our mind. It's just like,
yeah,
like in terms of math or these things that like I would love my kids to be amazing at math.
Yeah.
But it's possible in their life they won't need more than like maybe algebra.
And what about college? Like our kids aren't to that point yet, right? But I've seen interviews or different things with kids who have been unschooled their whole lives who want to go to college for some specific degree, and they are behind in math. But then a few months later, they just cram for a few months and they learn everything they need to know because that's how they're just used to operating that way. It's just like learning what they need to know. Yep. So instead of having it force fed to them for 12 years or however long, they just cram for a few months and they're already caught up, and they haven't developed that distaste and hatred for math.
Oh, right.
See, that's the thing.
Yeah, like
you develop. If you're force fed donuts all your life, you're going to hate donuts,
Homer Simpson, right? Then
right.
Homer Simpson, right.
The math thing is fascinating to me because like it's part of what I did, right, in my career was that we were algorithmic quantitative investors with a lot of math. But it's not hard math. It's really simple math. And like I'm struck by that being brought up as the number one question because so I got a bug about wanting to learn about quantum physics back when I was a kid, and it was a brand new field and everything. And so I read all of the books that were written for the popular audience, and I still was like, I still wanted to know more. And so I bought like the books that physicists were writing. And I'm like looking at it, it's like it's all math. And I have no clue what any of this is. And so
Fascinating.
my interest in quantum physics that I thought, well, I can learn this. I don't really want to, but I want to learn about the quantum physics.
Exactly.
Right.
And then what changed for me and made it a lot easier was essentially my understanding that math was just another language, right?
Mm.
And in my opinion now, math is the language of the universe. So I'm like really happy that happened to me, but it only happened to me because I had to do it because I was interested in something else.
Mhm.
So I think you're bang on about like the kids who are unschooled and they want to get a degree for some particular. And by the way, people say to me, "Why are you so anti-college?" I'm not anti-college. College can be a great experience, and if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or one of those things, then yeah, clearly you got to go to college for sure. And what I'm opposed to is people who just naturally assume, oh, I have to get a degree because that's what I got to do, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And to me, and this kind of vibes with what you were saying, like you're going to hate math if you're force-fed math for 12 years. You're going to really, really hate it. And so sometimes I think when people say, oh, you're so anti-college, no, I'm anti getting people to hate learning. Because learning
Perfect.
should be fun. Learning should be something that you want to do. And it's like, why do we strip it away from the way that we naturally do it, right? Stories, fun, exploration, adventure, right? Like all of those things are really fun. And what do all of those things lead to? Learning, right?
Right.
And so it's a bit like the force feeding of math, right? You want to get somebody to really hate something with a passion, feed it to them that way, and strip away the fun, strip away the adventure, strip away all of that, and then say, but you still got to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And disconnecting it from everything else too.
Oh.
That's another interesting thing, like in the school system, is separating subjects into totally separate subjects instead of the holistic, interconnected, like everything's connected with everything else.
And just completely separated from their own life. And like, I mean, that's the other thing that blows my mind is like the classic, like, you know, asking the teacher, like, why do I need to learn this? And then the only reasonable answer is like, well, maybe hypothetically sometime in the future you might use this. Like, it's so like yeah, it's not.
Because I said so.
Yeah, or yes, that's even worse.
That's easiest to.
The best professors I ever had, in both college and in high school, were, to your point, Martha, the one I still remember, Mr. Turvey's Ancient Civilizations, Modern Europe History. He always told stories, and he related it to our, like, he was my high school guy, right? So I was 17 when I took his class. His class was optional. I guess they call them AP classes now, right? But like the way, like I look forward to that class because, like, literally, you never knew what great story he was going to tell you, and always made sure that he made it relevant to, I guess it was 1977, so 1977 America, right? And I still remember one time him saying, "Hey, you guys, have any of you kids seen this movie Saturday Night Live?" And we're like, "Of course!" Like everyone saw that movie with John Travolta and the dancing, right? And so
Saturday Night Fever.
The Fever,
Yeah.
Saturday Night Fever, and like super popular movie, and like all of a sudden he's using it to explain the customs of dance and how they were super important to like the Austro-Hungarian Empire and why the waltz was so important and the formality. And like all of a sudden you're like learning all this stuff, but he's made it entirely relevant. And like, why is that like hard? I would think like one idea that I would love to fund is I think like the best teachers out there, they should be making millions of dollars. And like, how can we monetize like the best teachers in the world? Because as you both point out, there's a platform, YouTube. If they
Exactly. I was thinking about you too.
Yeah.
there'll be another one, right? Like, what do you think of that? Do you think that's possible? Do you think that's something that like could become a reality?
A platform for the best teachers in the world. Yeah, there's a lot of solutions people are coming out with. Obviously, if they're, I mean, YouTube is a great place, but making YouTube videos is not something everyone can do. You know, there's the filming and the editing and all that stuff. So even if they're great teachers, they might not be great YouTubers, right? There's Outschool, and those are online classes that just anyone can do and schedule, right?
So one that we just tried recently, and this is, you have a connection to them as well, Synthesis, which is a very interesting, it's not like a full-time school, but they do offer these like online classes. And so like our eldest daughter, Elsa, just tried one of those classes. Was that just yesterday?
It was just yesterday. Yeah.
Okay, so she's 10. And it was so cool. Like I got some great footage of it, because basically it was like they had like 10 or so kids and then like a few different adults there, and they were playing this like video game thing where they were supposed to like, they were like in the solar system and they were like connecting these dots and trying to like create these like networks, and they had like 4 teams. But the point of the game was that there was a rogue AI that was like one of the teams, and there was like 3 different AIs that had like a bunch of like different characteristics of how they operated. Like one of them had one strategy, another one had another strategy. And based on just those few characteristics, you were supposed to play the game and then decide which AI that was. And it was like watching like Ender's Game or something, or like, I mean, like my daughter, she loved it. She got sucked into it. She was playing it with the people. They were like going back and forth, arguing, being like, okay, well, this one's like acting like this AI, but no, it's like this AI. So whatever they're doing, they are definitely on to something, in terms of that approach. Because all those kids were super articulate, super engaged. It was amazing.
Yeah. So O'Shaughnessy Ventures is an investor in Synthesis School, and one of the reasons we are is because of what you just described. We saw it as a super interesting platform for engaging children, right? But also in teaching them how to think, not what to think. And we liked the process. And it sounds like Elsa enjoyed it as well. So I'm glad to hear that. I would have been less happy to hear, but it would have been instructive if it was like, no, that sucked.
Everyone understands like the normal school model, right? So if you're trying something new, it is a large part of it is just the communication of like what that even looks like, right? So
I mean, the probably the best form of education is just a private tutor, like Aristotle or so. I mean, like just having an adult, just like I was talking about with the class, like just having a conversation with them and exploring things. Like,
well,
but how do you sell that? Like, send your kids to me, and I will have a conversation with them.
Right.
Well, that's what the best teachers in the world will do.
That's the thing too, Jim. Like AI tutors is going to be a huge thing, because like already, like Martha and I on our projects, even for this fellowship, we were already using like ChatGPT to learn. Like we're already doing it. We'd be insane not to.
Yep. And that's even how I described ChatGPT when I was still in my software job is imagine having the most senior engineer you've ever met have nothing better to do than sit right next to you and answer your questions and pair program with you.
Yeah, who's also slightly drunk. Like, so you can't trust him completely. He's a little drunk.
Oh, okay, yes, that's true.
but apart from that, super smart.
I love that explanation. It's one of the reasons why I made such an big investment in Stability AI. Because the use case that I got most excited by, or two actually, one was the AI tutor. I think AI is going to revolutionize education, not just for kids, but for everybody, because the AI is you are going to be the data the AI learns on. And the AI is going to take your unique style of learning and begin to present lessons to you that fit and vibe with your style of learning. It's like, I don't know how you can get much better than that, right? Aristotle being Alexander the Great's tutor, great story.
Yeah, but even him, like even like back then, sure, one guy could pretty much know everything that an educated person would. That's impossible today.
Right.
No single person understands everything.
That's right.
Like we left that realm like decades or centuries ago, right?
Yep.
So it's like an AI is like, it's insane that like the breadth of knowledge.
And I'm going to steal this metaphor. Thank you very much. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Back when Aristotle was tutoring Alexander the Great, one man, like Aristotle, one person, could know everything. That stopped happening maybe in the middle of the 19th or 19th century, right? Maybe even earlier. AI, back to Aristotle, it can not only know everything, even though slightly drunk and hallucinating, but it also can be like Aristotle. It can tutor those kids in everything. And even better than Aristotle, it's an upgrade, because Aristotle might have really fucked it up with some other student. He vibed with Alexander, right?
right.
Maybe he wouldn't vibe with, Cato the Younger, who was, a rapscallion. So the AI, on the other hand, it doesn't care. It trains on you. And so Nat's AI has a completely different style than Martha's AI, which is completely different than Jim's AI. And that's the unlock that I think is so cool. And adding into the fact, the idea you just gave me that I'm going to steal, is it's like Aristotle, but who gets along with everybody and can present in everybody's style. I love it.
Yep.
Oh, this has been absolutely, look at this. Yeah. Well, we're already an hour and a half. This is awesome. What's next on the adventure? Where are you setting off to next? Do you have a plan? Is that known yet, or are you going to wing it?
We have a few things, a few options. We're not quite at the point of executing them yet. I really want to get the schoolie ready so we can just blast off. So that's the next couple weeks for me, is focusing on getting it ready to go. And then we will be unstoppable in my mind.
And just a quick question about that. I assume you're filming getting the schoolie ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely
my own edification, because I don't know anything about this. Like, how many hours of film will be shot getting the schoolie ready, and then what will that be compressed into in the edited version?
We were just talking about that.
Yeah, I think it makes great like YouTube videos. So I might make just my own YouTube videos.
Like just standalone. We might make standalone like, of the progress.
But in the film itself, I would see it as like one little 30-second montage or something. Like, we bought a school bus. Get ready. Yeah. Ready to go.
Yeah. So, condensing at least maybe like 15 hours into 30 seconds.
People who are really interested can watch the YouTube videos, but people watching the documentary just want, they don't want the whole grueling process,
Yeah.
So,
but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the future unlocks of like reinventing books, right? Audiobooks are going to be the easiest to reinvent, but books can and should be living things. And to your comment, some people are going to be super interested in all the backstory. So they should have access to if it's a biography or an autobiography, they should have access to the tapes that the author made with the subject.
Yeah. Well, you know, it'd be fascinating. Like, I've never really seen it happen, but be fascinating to watch a movie and like have like visual like footnotes where you could basically click on, like, if you're interested in like the schooling process, you click on a thing and it pops up another video and you can watch that.
You gotta be careful, because your goal is to be unemployable, and you sound like somebody who could work for OSV's Infinite Media. So
oh no, a job.
The shame.
Well, that sounds like one of the the least of many worse evils. So
All right.
but yeah, so that's our plan, is to get the schooling ready, and then we've interviewed a bunch of different schools, filmed a lot of that, but I'd still like to meet some like people that are adults that have gone through this kind of upbringing, and film their lives and get to know them a little more, which I think people will find really interesting. So
Totally
Definitely.
agree. Well, this has been, you've only underlined why I'm happy you guys got the first fellowship. I think this is awesome. I think it's going to be incredibly educational in a fun way. So I am super eager to follow along on your adventure. As you guys know, at the end of each of our podcasts, we say we're going to make you the empress and the emperor of the world. You each get to. And you can't kill anyone. You can't put anyone in a re-education. Isn't that right? Re-education?
Re-education.
yeah.
No, education has no part in what goes on in those camps. Anyway, what you can do is you can incept 2 ideas into the entire population of the earth. We're going to give you a magic microphone. You're going to speak 2 lines into it. And whenever all the other humans or sentient beings, let's not limit it to humans, all the other sentient beings that wake up whenever their morning is, they're going to think, I just had the 2 best ideas in the world, and I'm going to do both of these things. You each get 2. Martha, I'm going to start with you.
Oh no. 2 ideas
ideas.
concept in every brain in the world.
So you're asking the wrong people, Jim. We intentionally.
I was really looking forward to this just for that.
So the one thing I would that I feel comfortable incepting is you can just do stuff.
I love that.
That's something I firmly believe. And then for the second one, I would say, you can just stop doing stuff.
Oh, that's good too.
So basically, if you're playing a game that you don't like, if you're playing a game that you don't like, you can quit. I'm a huge believer in that.
I like it. I like that a lot. Martha, pressure's on.
How about that you were made for perfect joy, and it is possible. How about that's 1. And 2 would be love and freedom are love requires freedom. How about that? Is that communicating something?
Oh yeah,
requires freedom.
Great. Tony DeMello, that's one of his big deals. He said that you can't truly love another person and seek to control them or seek dominion over them. And that if you want to know whether you actually love somebody, you got to be able to say to them without any guile or any dishonesty that I leave you free to be yourself and to pursue what you want and what you love. And if that means sometimes that it's going to be things away from me, that's okay. So Tony was a pretty switched on guy who became enlightened after a long, long talk with a terminally ill rickshaw driver. He used to be a Jesuit priest, and he became so enlightened that the Catholics excommunicated him. They rehabilitated him later.
That's kind of a trend in the Catholic Church, isn't it? Like, no, you're too extreme. Oh wait, you were onto something.
Probably acted too hastily back then. We probably shouldn't have burned all those people at the stake. We're sorry.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so how can people follow along? Twitter, I know. Your channel, you have a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
What's
it's just at Nat and Martha. I think, isn't it?
Yeah. The tag is Nat and Martha
Sharpe.
The best way to find us or find our information and stuff is natandmartha.com. So that has
links to everything.
That has our intro video. It has a pitch video. It has links. So
perfect. All right, guys, I am delighted to be along for this adventure, and I know with the 2 of you, it is going to be a fun one. Thank you for coming on.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.